Já, góðan daginn. Ég vil bjóða ykkur velkomin til þessa fundar, en að honum stöndum við sameiginlega félagið Ísland Palestína og fundarröðin til róttækrar skoðunar. En gestur okkar Gideon Levy, ísraelskur rithöfundur og blaðamaður, margverðlaunaður bæði í Ísrael og á heimsvísu, hefur hlotið meðal annars Olof Palme mannréttindaverðlaunin. Hann fastur skribent hjá Haaretz, einu áhrifamesta blaði í Ísrael, skrifar það reglulega, situr í stjórn blaðsins. Það gefið út á hebresku og ensku og þá í samvinnu við New York Times. Hann hefur haldið uppi málstað Palestínumanna í langan tíma, óslitið í 35 ár. Það ekki margir sem eru tilbúnir að standa með sannfæringu sinni og mannréttindunum í Ísrael eins og hann hefur gert. Hann hefur alla tíð sinnt á móti straumnum og eins og við vitum þá straumþungt í Ísrael. Hann mun flytja hérna fyrirlestur og síðan gefst kostur á að viðra sín sjónarmið eða koma fram með spurningar til hans, og við gerum ráð fyrir að menn verði mjög stuttorðir. Við erum að tala þær bara augnabliks komment. En áður þá mun Hjálmtýrs Heiðdals, formaður félagins Ísland Palestínu, fara nokkrum orðum stöðuna eins og hún blasir við núna, og þá ekki síst hvernig hún horfir við Íslendingum og hvað okkur ber að gera mannréttindum til stuðnings í Palestínu. Félagið Ísland Palestína hefur verið starfandi árabil. Ég sé hér fyrrum formann, svona eins konar íslenskan, Gideon Levy og Björk Vilhelmsdóttur sem eru það, karl og kona, Gideon Levy, eða hvað heita nú allir, Mandela og fólkið sem hefur þor til að standa með sannfæringu sinni. Nú við erum með annan formann sem hefur verið mjög kröftugur í skrifum og málflutningi fyrir málstað Palestínumanna árabil, hefur skrifað mikið sjálfur, þar á meðal þessa bók hér sem við langar til að vekja athygli á, Iceland Street. Það stræti í Ísrael, Tel Aviv, held ég að sé, sem skýrt í Jerúsalem, já, sem var skýrt svo hér á árum endur á 7. áratugnum held ég. En ég vek athygli á þessari bók, hún til sölu hérna, eins og sitt hvað annað á baka til. Og það sem sagt Ísland Palestína og þessi fundarröð sem stendur að þessum fundi, og mér langar til að bjóða hér í pontuna hinn skipuleggjandan að þessari ráðstefnu, Hjálmtýrs Heiðdals, til að fara yfir stöðuna í nokkrum mínútum. Gjörðu svo vel.
Takk. Fyrirsögnin sem fyrir mitt erindi hvað ber Íslendingum að gera. Og ég ætla að reifa hér þessa sögu og hvar við stöndum og staðan sem uppi í dag. Og þegar við ræðum málefni Palestínu og Ísraels hér á Íslandi rétt að skoða okkar eigin þátt frá upphafi. Þegar fulltrúar Íslands á allsherjarþingi Samvinnu þjóðanna árið 1947 ásamt fulltrúum 33 annarra ríkja samþykktu að leggja til að landi Palestínu yrði skipt á milli frumbyggja landsins og aðkomufólks frá Evrópu. Síðar studdi Ísland inntöku Ísraels í samtök Sameinuðu þjóðanna þótt Ísrael uppfyllti ekki þau skilyrði sem ríkið þurfti að gangast undir til þess að fá aðild. Og enn þann dag í dag uppfyllir Ísrael ekki ýmis skilyrði, nefna má afstöðu til réttinda flóttamanna og bann við fjöldarefsingum. Ísland var síðar í áratugi í hópi þeirra ríkja sem undir forystu Bandaríkjanna studdu Ísrael á alþjóðavettvangi þrátt fyrir sífelld brot Ísraels gegn mannréttindum Palestínumanna. Í upphafi byggðu íslenski stjórnmálamenn afstöðu sína á trúarlegum grunni og vanþekkingu. Í samskiptum við ráðamenn í Ísraels voru biblíutilvitnanir tíðar og trú á blekkingum síónista alls ráðandi. Og það vottaði fyrir töluverðu stolti þegar íslenskir stjórnmálamenn sögðu frá þætti Íslands í tilveru Ísraels og á móti þá sýndu ráðamenn Ísraels Íslendingum virðingu og þökkuðu fyrir stuðninginn. Ben Gurion, leiðtogi Síðurnásta sem kom hingað 1962, hann sagði: Vér erum litlar þjóðir sem eiga í höggi við harða náttúru og leitast við að nýta allar auðlindir til fulls. Hvorug þjóðin óskar annars en að mega vinna störf sín í friði. Ísland eitt þeirra landa sem fylgir tveggja ríkja lausninni, það að ríki Palestínu sem stofnaði innan landamæranna eins og þau voru fyrir 6 daga stríðið 1967. Íslensk stjórnvöld hafa einnig lýst stuðningi við svokallað friðarferli og gerir enn. Í þá 5 áratugi sem Ísland og önnur ríki hafa fylgt þessari stefnu, þá hafa mál þróast æ fjær því að ná þeim markmiðum sem í orðunum felast. Það ríkir engin friður og engar raunverulega friðarviðræður og Ísrael hefur lagt undir sig sífellt stærri hluta landsins og nú búa 700.000 landtökumenn á Vesturbakkanum og í Austur-Jerúsalem. Staða Palestínumanna hefur versnað og í 75 ár hafa milljónir þeirra búið við skert réttindi innan Ísraels, hernám og umsátur á Vesturbakkanum og á Gaza. Sú spurning verður æ áleitnari hvort viðhald tveggja ríkja lausnarinnar þjóni í dag eingöngu hagsmunum Ísraels. Það engin þrýstingur á Ísrael að breyta stefnu sinni og með hverjum degi rísa fleiri landtökubyggðir, landránsbyggðir eins og ég vil nefna það, á Vesturbakkanum ásamt því að ofsóknir gegn Palestínumönnum aukast. Ekki síst eftir valdatöku nýrrar ríkisstjórnar Ísraels. Ráðherrar í ríkisstjórn Netanyahús eru ófeimnir við að lýsa yfir fylgi við fasisma og trú á yfirburði gyðinga. Í stefnu yfirlýsingu Netanyahús stendur og þetta er tilvitnun: Gyðingaþjóðin hefur einkarétt og óumdeilanlega rétt til alls landrýmis í Ísrael. Ríkisstjórnin mun stuðla að og þróa landnemabyggðir í gjörvöldu Ísrael, í Galíleu, í Negev, Gólan, Júdeu og Samaríu. En Júdea og Samaría er heiti sem Ísraelsstjórn notar yfir Vesturbakkann þar sem milljónir Palestínumanna búa. Og þeir búa við hernám, eins og þekkt er. Í þessu ljósi verður tveggja ríkja lausn og friðarferlið marklaust. Annar aðilinn segist eiga allan rétt og réttur Palestínumanna til að búa í eigin landi er ekki viðurkenndur. Það var mikilvægur áfangi þegar Ísland árið 2011 var fyrst Vesturlanda til að viðurkenna ríki Palestínumanna sem sjálfstætt og fullvalda ríki innan landamæranna frá því fyrir 6 daga stríðið 1967. En síðan hefur ekkert gerst, nema það að nú sitja fulltrúar Íslands á þingi Samvinnu þjóðanna hjá þegar hagsmunamál Palestínumanna eru borin upp. Og Alþingi heykist á því 11. árið í röð að samþykkja þingsályktun vörur frá ólöglegum landránsbyggðum á Vesturbakkanum að þær séu merktar sem slíkar en ekki fluttar inn sem vörur frá Ísrael. Og áfengis- og tóbaksverslun ríkisins selur vín frá landránsbyggð á Vesturbakkanum og falsar upplýsingar uppruna vínsins í trássi við mannréttindadómstóls Evrópu frá 2019 og merkingu á vörum frá hernumdum svæðum og ákvæðum 4. Genfarsáttmálans hernám og aðgerðir á hernumdum svæðum. Undanfarin misseri hafa mörg alþjóðleg mannréttindasamtök lýst því yfir að í Ísrael ríki aðskilnaðarstefna eða apartheid. Samtök Sameinuðu þjóðanna hafa fordæmt aðskilnaðarstefnuna og lýst því yfir að apartheid sé glæpur gegn mannkyni. Þessi glæpur gegn mannkyni, alþjóðlegur glæpur og refsiverður samkvæmt Rómarsamþykkt alþjóðlega glæpadómstólsins frá 1988 sem Alþingi fullgilti árið 1999. Í Ísrael virðast engin þjóðfélagsöfl fær eða hafa vilja til að breyta ástandinu. Það sem hefur verið fram að þessu sameinað nánast öll stjórnmálaöfl í Ísrael kúgun, árásir og brottrekstur Palestínumanna. Eða eins og ísraelska blaðakonan Zehava Galon sagði: hernámið okkar stóra þjóðarverkefni og það hefur staðið svo lengi að við getum ekki ímyndað okkur lífið án hernámsins. Hvað ber Íslendingum að gera þegar staðan mála eins og hér lýst? Hvernig getum við stutt baráttu Palestínumanna fyrir frelsi og mannréttindum? Palestínumenn sem búa við ofuröfli eins af öflugustu herjum veraldarinnar hafa biðlað til umheimsins og kallað eftir alþjóðlegri samstöðu sniðgöngu, efnahagsþvinganir og afturköllun fjárfestinga í Ísrael. Eða eins og það heitir á ensku BDS, Boycott, Divestment, Sanctions. BDS-hreyfingin skorar á þjóðir, fyrirtæki, samtök og einstaklinga heim allan að sniðganga Ísrael þar til stjórnvöld þar í landi, fylgja alþjóðalögum og virða mannréttindi palestínsku þjóðarinnar til fulls. Sniðgönguhreyfingin hefur unnið ýmsa sigra, en það á brattan að sækja því áhrif Ísraels eru víða. Við þekkjum þetta hér heima. Ísrael með í Eurovision. Íslenskt íþróttafólk keppir við íþróttafólk frá Ísrael og ÁTVR heldur áfram að selja vín í krafti falsaðra upprunavottorða eins og fyrr segir. Katrín Jakobsdóttir, forsætisráðherra, lýsti því yfir daginn að tilvitnun dýpsta hugmyndafræðilega barátta á okkar tímum snýst mannréttindi, snýst lýðréttindi og lýðræðismál. Ég tel að íslensk stjórnvöld sem lýsa yfir mikilvægi mannréttinda og eiga að starfa á grundvelli alþjóðaréttar og mannréttindasáttmála Sameinuðu þjóðanna og þar með styðja málstað Palestínu á alþjóðavettvangi. Liður í því stuðningur við sniðgönguhreyfinguna og svara því kalli palestínsku samtakanna, líkt og þegar Alþingi setti viðskiptabann á Suður-Afríku 1988. Fyrsta skrefið væri að fylgja úrskurði Mannréttindadómstóls Evrópu merkingu á vöru frá hernumdu svæðunum. Næsta skref væri að fylgja nýsamþykktri ákvörðun Verkalýðssambands Evrópu að sniðganga allar vörur frá hernumdu svæðunum. Og ASÍ og BSRB og BHM eru aðilar að þessum samtökum. Og síðan verðum við að ganga lengra. Við erum að skora á íslenskt íþróttafólk, íþróttasambönd, íslenskt listafólk og íslensk fyrirtæki að sniðganga Ísrael því sniðgangan á sviði viðskipta, menningar og íþrótta sterkasta vopnið og sú aðgerð sem skilar mestum árangri og getur svipt Ísrael því skjóli sem það hefur í dag af samvinnu í lýðræðisríki. Takk.
Þá komið að því að hlýða á Gideon Levy. Gideon Levy, please.
Thank you, Ögmundar. I can't tell you how happy I am to be here today. We are negotiating this visit over 4 or 5 years now, maybe more. And Iceland was always a legendary place in my imagination. The matter of fact is I never believed I'll make it to come to Iceland because it was really like a legend somewhere in the Atlantic Ocean, a place where everything is beautiful and all the people are right and just. And here I am, and after one day, one amazing day with my hosts, I come to the conclusion that the reality is maybe even better than the legends I had in my mind. So first of all, I'm really deeply grateful for the hospitality. Katrin and I are traveling quite a lot. I don't remember many hosts like you, with the generosity and the kindness and the knowledge and everything. So we might come again. I warn you. But this will be more or less the last smile for today, I guess. Because by the time we are talking here, by the time we are all meeting here and sitting in this really amazing venue, Jewish settlers are now having another pogrom in another Palestinian village, burning houses, burning cars, threatening the people, threatening the children. And the Israeli army stands behind, as in the last days, and does nothing. just protect the settlers and practically take part in those pogroms. Those pogroms take now place 3 or 4 days. In the last 4 days, there were 35 pogroms in the West Bank. Nobody can stand to protect the Palestinians in those pogroms. They are totally helpless. Nobody will protect them. You can just watch from the window and hope for the good. You will see those gangsters from the settlements burning your house or burning your car, burning your sheep or burning your storage place, and just hope that nobody will be hurt, that you cannot do anything. Nobody will protect you. And so they stay there helpless, maybe as an image for the overall situation of the Palestinian people in the last decades, totally helpless. And the situation became, in the recent years, much worse. But I want to try to give also some kind of analysis, because it's not only about the victim that we have to take care of and feel pity for. It is before everything else. It is about justice. It is about obeying to the international law. It is about norms in the international community. It is about morality in politics and international relationship. It is about manners of the international community and the duties of the international community and the responsibilities of the international community. The Israeli occupation, as all of you know, is now over 55 years old. And this is a moment in which we have to call the bluff and say the truth. This is not a temporary occupation. It has no intention to come to its end, and after 55 years we have to stop to call it occupation, because military occupation by definition is something temporary. This is not temporary. And we have to face it that we lied ourselves for many years that the occupation is just ending. We'll just find a partner, peace process, Americans, peace conference, and the occupation will be over. No, I think there was never an intention to put an end to it, but it doesn't matter now. The fact is that after 55 years, this is not a temporary phenomenon. Israel exists with the occupation 3 or 4 times more than without the occupation. So this is part of Israel. That's Israel. Which leads us to the second conclusion that we have to face. A country, a state, which possesses such a brutal anti-democratic regime like a military occupation, any military occupation, cannot be perceived as a democracy. It can be perceived as a democracy as long as the occupation is temporary. It happens. There is a war, countries conquer some piece of land, and then there is an agreement. After a few years, the occupation is over. That's not the case. And the occupation is part of Israel, and we should define Israel not in the same terms that we used to define it until now. For so many years, Israel is the darling of the West, the only democracy in the Middle East, with the most moral army in the world, getting more budgets and support from the United States than any other country in history, getting support and aid from the EU, from the West, and always the justification is the shared values. We share the same values. It is this villa in the jungle in the Middle East which represent us, the liberals, the Democrats. We have one outpost in the Middle East vis-à-vis those Islamic barbarian regimes, and Israel is our outpost. Therefore, we support Israel. But Israel, the other day, We have been, Catherine and I, in the National Day, it's not called National Day, the Flag Day of Sweden. And there was, at the Swedish ambassador residence in Tel Aviv, and there was a minister, a very right-wing minister, and she spoke about the joint values, the common values between Swedes and Israelis, and someone whispered on my ear, now she had offended 80% of the Swedes. We have to realize it, that we cannot take Israel as a democracy anymore. Because under Israeli rule, there are 15 million people living in all kinds of ways of ruling them. There are around 7 million Jews and 7 million Palestinians, or 7.5. All of them are under Israeli rule in many methods. The Jews under Israeli rule really enjoy a full liberal democracy, and I am the best proof. I gain total freedom of speech, any kind of freedom. I appear on Israeli TV often and regularly. I cannot complain. I am really living in a democracy. Then we have the Israeli citizens who are Palestinians, around 2 million people. They get all the formal rights. They have passports, they can participate in the election, and they do participate in the election. They have their parties, their representatives, but they are deeply discriminated. We will not get to it, but in any possible field. Budgets, recognition, legislation, the legal system, wherever you go, an Israeli Palestinian, an Israeli citizen will be discriminated. I will not get into the details, but it is deep and overall. And then we face around 5 million Palestinians who are living in two ways of occupation. Around 3 million are living in the West Bank under a very brutal military occupation without any rights. The only people in the world may be without any citizenship. No citizenship. People without citizenship. Part of them have the Jordanian citizenship, but most of them have no citizenship. Imagine yourself a people without citizenship. The North Koreans have citizenship. They don't have. And the future and the present and the past, obviously, is just living under this ongoing humiliation of living under a very brutal occupation. And then we have over 2 million people living in Gaza, which by all means is the biggest cage in the world. This is maybe the biggest experiment in human beings that ever took place. Take 2 million people, put them in a cage, and wait, now it's 16 years already, and wait and see what happens to 2 million people in a cage. And they are in a cage. And Israel is controlling the cage. Israel pulled out because, you know, you were Minister of Police, you know there are jails in which the guard sits inside the prison, and there are some other prisons that the guard gets out and let the prisoners stay by themselves without guarding them from inside, but only from outside. This is Gaza. None of us here, with all the respect to all of you, can imagine himself what does it mean to be living in Gaza. I cannot imagine it. I couldn't go there for the last 16 years. None of us can imagine what does it mean to be a young man in Gaza without any perspective. Nothing. You can study everything and do nothing with what you studied. You can produce everything and you cannot export it to anywhere. You can dream any dreams and never fulfill them because you cannot go out. You cannot get out. Imagine yourself Iceland without any possibility for anyone to get out or come in. And Iceland is so much more beautiful than Gaza, even though Gaza is beautiful as well and could be a paradise, but it's not the case. Now this reality is taking place now for decades. You go to the West Bank, you see one village next to the other. One village is a Jewish settlement. They have all the resources and all the rights, citizenship, obviously, freedom of movement, totally, everything you can imagine yourself, unlimited quantity of water, electricity, everything you can imagine yourself. Next by, there is a Palestinian village, much older, obviously, than the settlement, hundreds of years there, attached so much more to the land, and they have nothing. No rights, no citizenship. They will not participate in the elections that their neighbors are participating. They lost. There is not one single village that didn't lose most of its lands for the settlements in a total illegal way. There is not one single family that doesn't have at least one son in the Israeli jail. Recently, we reached another peak with 1,000 Palestinian detainees without trial. 1,000 people who don't know what are the charges and don't know for how long they will stay in jail. No democracy in the world has even one detainee without charges, without going through court, without knowing what are the charges against you. We have now 1,000. And obviously around 6,000 Palestinian prisoners, which always goes bigger and bigger. There is not one family that any of its member was either killed or detained. In the last 6 months of this year, there were 160 Palestinians already killed. All those figures from a baby of 2.5 years, Muhammad Tamimi, 3 weeks ago, to an old man of 80 who was in a very brutal way thrown on the ground and kept in a very cold night, handicapped until he got a heart attack and died, and nobody cared. 160 people who were killed, most of them, not all of them, but most of them for nothing. I give you all those figures just to give you a sense, what does it mean to live under the occupation on a daily basis? People who live half away from the sea and had never seen the sea. Half an hour away from the sea. And you could never get there because there is the separation wall. This reality cannot be defined in any other way but apartheid. There is no other definition. It's not a matter of political arguments now. How, and please, I will be happy to hear other ideas. When there are two villages, one has all the rights and the other has no rights, and it is on an ethnic basis, a national basis, how else can you call it? It looks like apartheid, it walks like apartheid, it talks like apartheid, it is apartheid. And there is no other way. We can continue to praise Israel for the democratic front it has. Go to Tel Aviv, the most gay-friendly city in the world. Beaches, some of you have been there, beaches, restaurants, liberal people, happy people, amazing place for tourists, amazing place to discover the past and the present, innovation people, everything is true. But when you have this reality in your backyard, you cannot be perceived but as an apartheid state. Now, being an apartheid state must call the world for any kind of second thoughts. I mean, we are facing the second apartheid state in history, and all of a sudden we are totally paralyzed. You were so active in such a remarkable way vis-à-vis the first apartheid state. Even the United States was active against the first apartheid state. And if it's not the international community, apartheid in South Africa takes place until today, I have no doubt. With all the respect to the struggle, to the brave struggle of Nelson Mandela and the ANC, without the intervention of the world, of civil societies, of sanctions, of boycotting South Africa in sport and in commerce and in anything. If not this, they are there until today. As far as I understood, it was the business community who came to the government in South Africa and told them, the white business community, and told them we cannot take it anymore. It doesn't work. So we have a precedent of an apartheid state which the world knew very well what to do without violence, without involving any army, no boots on the ground, nothing. Just awareness and moral values and involvement and readiness to be active, to do something about some evil phenomena in the world. And now we are facing the second apartheid state. And not only the world is not doing anything, this apartheid state continues to be the darling of the West. And continues to decide in a way what is legitimate to be discussed in Europe and what is not legitimate to be discussed in Europe. They will decide if criticism about Israel or about the occupation is legitimate or not. And when Israel decided that any criticism about Israel is anti-Semitism, Europe was paralyzed. And that's already a question of freedom of speech of Europe. Not only of the rights of the Palestinians, but also the rights of the Europeans. And Israel, in a very sophisticated policy, together with the Jewish lobby and others, succeeded to create a new reality, mainly in Europe, but also in the United States, but mainly in Europe, in which to criticize Israel is criminalized. I can't remember such reality elsewhere ever. I always tell this story about this solidarity group in Berlin, which invited me to attend the annual meeting, a very small group, smaller than yours. And they couldn't find a venue in Berlin to attend their annual meeting. And we had to travel 200 kilometers from Berlin to a monastery in the mountains in which an Egyptian monk was ready to rent them his monastery in order to have this conference. What does this mean? How can it be that what I can write in my newspaper criticizing Israel is almost impossible now in many countries? Not only in Germany, by the way. You cannot criticize Israel in Sweden. And if you do, you are going to pay a price. Look what they have done to Jeremy Corbyn. Look what they are doing now to Roger Waters. Anyone who dares to criticize Israel or the occupation is immediately labeled as an anti-Semite. And nobody wants to be labeled as an anti-Semite. This is a cynical manipulation. And I think that Europe shouldn't surrender to it, shouldn't fall to this trap. You can be a great critic of Israel and still not have 1 gram in your bones of anti-Semitism. You can be a great critic of Israel and be a man or a woman of morality. I even think that if you are not a critic of Israel, you are neither a moral human being nor even a friend of Israel. Those who support Israel now, those who shut their mouths, those who let Israel go so wild and violent, are not caring about Israel. Because finally it will destroy Israel. We see the beginning already. We are facing now the most right-wing fascist government that we ever faced. Some of the parties in the current Israeli government could have never run, not in Iceland, not in Sweden, and not in Germany. The right-wingers in those countries, or in Italy, the right-wingers that you see in Europe now, they are much more moderate than the right-wingers that we have in Israel. Those are declared fascists, declared racist. They don't mind to expose their views. They are very clear about their plans. And by the end of the day, their plan is to see the whole land between the Jordanian River and the Mediterranean clean from Arabs. That's the vision. It started in 1948, and they are really willing, and they say so, for another Nakba. Not today, not immediately, but that's the vision. And those people are now in power in Israel. But I must say, and I'm very criticized about it in Israel, don't expect too much also from the Zionist left in Israel. Because the Zionist left speaks much nicer, is much softer, is more liberal in his views, talks to the Palestinians, cares about the Palestinians, wants some softer occupation, some more liberal occupation, but by the end of the day, when it comes to the core question, should the occupation continue or not, there is a wall-to-wall consensus in Israel supporting the occupation. And if not saying it, at least behaving like this. I don't think that the Israeli left had ever a serious intention to put a full end to the occupation. More than this, I don't think that the Zionist left had ever perceived the Palestinians as equal human rights with equal national rights. Because if you offer the Palestinians equality, you cannot be a Zionist. And all the Zionist left is Zionist, and in Israel, being not Zionist is almost a crime. It is illegitimate. It is crossing the lines. And Zionism, again, we have to tear the masks. I wouldn't say it 10 years ago, but after all those years, we have to understand that Zionism has one basic meaning: Jewish superiority in Israel. Anyone who accepts superiority of one people over another is a racist. We are two peoples, and if one people has superiority, you can't call it, in other words, only as racism. And Zionism, that's the idea of Zionism. This belief that we can have it both a Jewish and a democratic state, as almost all of the Israelis define themselves, is the bluff of the century. Because you have to choose either Jewish or a democracy. Iceland is not an Icelandic state. Iceland is a democracy. And Israel should not be a Jewish state, but a democracy. And if it chooses to be a Jewish state, it cannot be a democracy, because we are two peoples there. And if you want to be a democracy, the minimum that you should have done was to pull out from the occupied territories, and then at least you stay with a small minority of Palestinians. Then maybe you can speak about a Jewish state, but not when it is 50-50. Not if half of your population is not Jewish. How can you be a Jewish state with half of the population which is not Jewish, Palestinian? Even if you call it in all kinds of names, Gaza, we pulled out, the West Bank, it's temporary. No. Those times are over. And this brings me to the last conclusion, political conclusion, which you might share with me and might not, you might like or might not, but we have to think, what are we aiming to? Where are we going to? And for many years, for most of us, I guess, the name of the game was the two-state solution. It is a very reasonable solution. Two peoples are sharing one piece of land. Let's divide the land. One part will be a Jewish state, one part will be a Palestinian state. Sounds very, very reasonable and just in a way. It's not total justice, and there will be never total justice in the Middle East, because total justice for the Palestinians means that all the Jews will go back to Europe, which means a new injustice. And total just for the Jews means that only the Jews will be between the river and the Mediterranean. This is also not justice, obviously. So we can't speak in terms of total justice, but we can speak about in terms of relative justice. The two-state solution was such a solution. For many years we lived in the illusion or the lie, depends on your point of view, that this solution is on the shelf and we just have to take it and to implement it. We have a solution. The EU fall in love with this solution. The Americans obviously fall in love in the solution. We carried the longest peace process in history based on this two-state solution. But I'm afraid to tell you that Israel had never had a real serious intention to implement it. There were all kinds of interim tricks, like Oslo. For example, in the two-state solution, it was obviously agreed by everybody that the Palestinian state will be demilitarized. What kind of thing is this? Israel can have any weapon in the world and the Palestinian state have no right to protect itself? Nothing? How long can this last? A state without any kind of protection vis-à-vis a very aggressive state. It's not Iceland, an island in the ocean. It is a Palestinian state which faces Israel, which is a regional superpower with any weapons that you imagine yourself. How can we demand them to be demilitarized? But it's not only about this. The idea was that the Palestinian state will somehow absorb all the 700,000 settlers, or at least part of them. What kind of state is this? The settler who went there with a very clear political intention to prevent any solution of two-state solution, they will remain the citizens of the Palestinian state. But all this is really passé, because today we are facing 700,000 Jewish settlers in the West Bank, including East Jerusalem, 500,000 in the West Bank, only in the West Bank. They are the strongest political group in Israel, and there will be never an Israeli politician who will be able to evacuate them from the West Bank. Forget about it, it will not happen. And if you don't evacuate 500,000 settlers, you don't have a viable Palestinian state. No way. There are those who play with all kinds of games and will make bridges and tunnels, and the settlers will go here and the Palestinians will go here. It's very nice, it will never work. The Palestinians deserve a viable, full state, not half a state and not a state plus or a state minus, as they call it. No. Either after what they went through in the last 100 years, they deserve full rights, not half rights. And they will not get it in a two-state solution. It's impossible, even if there will be good intention. So here we stay with the one and only solution left, which right now sounds like the fairy tale of Iceland, in my view, and this is obviously the one-state solution. The one-state solution, thank you. The one-state solution, which so many people say, no, it's impossible, it will never happen, happened a long time ago. We are living in a one-state. The only problem is that it's not a democracy. But we are living in a one state between the Jordan River and the Mediterranean. It is one state. Come to the West Bank and see. You go from my home to Nablus or to Jenin in half an hour, and this is a one state under one rule with different laws, obviously, like any apartheid regime. It has different laws for the Jews and different laws for the Jewish citizens, different laws for the Palestinians living under the occupation, namely military laws, which has nothing to do neither with law nor with justice. But it is a one state. And we live together now for 55 years. Better times, worse times, but we are together. We are in one state. No equality whatsoever. They clean our streets and build our homes. We are tyranning them but finally we are together. It is a one state. And I think that the world should now move toward this solution, which is a long journey to go, but we have to start it. At least there is a vision. There is a vision of equal rights, of one person, one vote. That's the only open vision. There is no other vision. Now, for Europe and for the United States, this is big embarrassment. For Israel, it is unacceptable at all, because that's the end of the idea of a Jewish state. But you can't have it all, dear Israelis. You can't eat the cake and have it complete. No. You ate the cake and now you have to take the consequences. Now, the one-state solution, which is so threatening, will come instead of this ongoing bluff of the two-state solution. Today, all the Europeans and part of the Americans, deep in their heart, at least part of them, understand that the two-state solution is just a way to break away. Just a way to say we are doing something for peace. We have this solution on the shelf and let's wait. Let's wait. The settlers will continue to do their pogroms. The soldiers will continue to kill. And we will wait for a better time, which will never come. Maybe a new Palestinian partner, maybe a new reality. Let's wait. But time ran out, not is running out, ran out. We cannot wait anymore. The Palestinians for sure cannot wait anymore. And the two-state solution is dead. It's a train that left the station. You might think, like me, that it was never born, but in any case, it is dead now, in my view. Based on what you see on the ground, not based on ideology. I would love to have the two-state solution. It is impossible. And therefore, I think that we should change the discourse everywhere, including Europe, and start to speak about the one-state solution as the only possible solution, and start to speak about equal rights. And let Israel say no to equal rights. And when Israel says no to equal rights, it declares itself formally as an apartheid state. If you say no to equal rights, game over. You are not a democracy. Because any democracy contains equal rights as the first basis. And this should be, and I feel that this idea can also recruit more people to the struggle. Because we are now in one of the lowest points in our struggle ever. Europe is facing now much bigger problems which bother it much more, from environment to Ukraine, from immigration to other questions, and the Palestinians are totally forgotten, bleeding on the side of the road. Also, many Europeans and others feel that it repeats itself, it doesn't go to anywhere, we cannot do anything about it, we'll pay this hollow lip service of two-state solution, we'll come once in 2-3 years to Jerusalem and then go to Abu Mazen in Ramallah, to Abbas in Ramallah, and by this we did something for peace. I'm speaking now about the politicians. And by this we are still in favor of peace in the Middle East, and we'll go on to other things. But the Palestinian question will never leave us as long as it's bleeding. Even if we have the feeling that it is forgotten, and it is forgotten, and the Palestinians are now in the lowest point, totally abandoned, totally forgotten, totally lonely, no support, neither from the Arab world, everyone betrayed them, nor from the West. Israel is by far stronger than ever, politically and militarily, and they are really thrown on the side of the road without really any hope. And the only hope is right now the international community. And the only hope in the international community is trying to come with something fresh, with something new, and challenge, first of all, Israel. And therefore I'm so happy to see that in this place so many people are still ready to come on such a, it's not sunny anymore, okay. It changes here within minutes. But it was sunny when you came here in such a sunny Saturday, and discuss something which is very far away from you. Really, I mean, your life is wonderful with finding a solution to the Palestinian problem or without it. And believe me, you can live very well with a solution and with Israel as an apartheid state and without it. The problem is that also the Israelis are having quite a good life with the occupation and without it. And that's exactly the point where the international community can contribute. Because the status quo will be broken once the Israelis will feel the occupation, once they will start to be taken accountable, once they will start to pay for it, and once that they will be punished for it. And when they will pay a price for the occupation, many Israelis will ask themselves, do we really want it? Is it worth it? Because most of the Israelis, I can tell you, almost all of them, are not even bothered by those issues. The Palestinian problem is not on the table in Israel at all. The Israeli media is not covering the occupation almost at all. It's half an hour away from our homes, half an hour drive, not flight. Half an hour drive from our homes, and we don't want to know nothing, and we know nothing. And it is for the international community, mainly civil societies, mainly people like you, who will raise their voice and start to push their governments, and also by their own activities. Everyone finds its own way to express himself, to start to remind everyone that 7 hours flight from here, we came with the first direct flight of Iceland Air to Reykjavik, and 7 hours away from here, there is an unacceptable reality that the world, and the West in particular, is financing, is hugging, is supporting, and is doing nothing to put an end to it. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much for your informative and very inspiring talk. You said you would not make us smile, and you're right. The prospects are bleak, but you not merely describe the situation, you also tell us how things can be changed. And this is what inspires us, I'm sure. Og nú orðið laust og Sveitin Rúnar hefur beðið orðið og ég ætla að beða þeim að koma hér í pontuna.
Gideon Levy, welcome, and thank you very much for an extraordinary, interesting lecture. I was glad that you agree with us in Iceland. There's an old saying, vinur sá til vams segir. And this is what I have always claimed. Also when we were criticizing the Vietnam War, we were supposed to be anti-American. It was very hard for me to be an anti-American, but being an exchange student, one of the most precious years in my life was when I was in Seattle. I was never anti-American, but that is what we had to listen to. And now we are Gyðingahatar, anti-Semites. That is even put into law in Europe, like you have pointed out. It's illegal to criticize Israel. Það óbeinlínis ólöglegt að gagnrýna Ísrael. Þetta yfirgengilegt hvernig staðan komin í heiminum og hvert overvald síonistana There is actually only one question I want to ask you. You talked about the Israel's control over 15 million. This is actually one state, and of course you are right when you look at where the power lies. And we, Björk and I, we have just returned from Al-Khalil, from Hebron, from Al-Quds, from Salfit, Teristia, Nablus, or especially Jenin and the refugee camp in Jenin. And only two weeks later we had to listen to the news of another mass murder by the Israeli army. Half of the deaths in the West Bank, about half of the deaths in the West Bank, they are the murders of the Israeli military in Jenin. It's really something But you mentioned that these 15 millions and 7 million Jews and maybe 7.5 million Palestinians. What I would like to remind us of are the Palestinians outside, in the refugee camps, still in Lebanon and other places. This is really my question. It's about al-Awda. It's about the right of return. This is the most important resolution of the United Nations, which was first made in 49, the first one after the one in 47, and after that reiterated every year the right of return, which is of course the human right of every person. And I would like your comments on the right of return of Palestinian refugees.
Thank you. Obviously, it's not a very easy question because, as I said in my talk before, there will never be a total justice. The Palestinians have the right of return, in my view, and will have a right in return in the one state. In my vision, in a one state, when there are equal rights, there will be one immigration policy for Jews and for Palestinians, and we will have to come to terms. I mean, we cannot open, also for Jews, we cannot open the doors to continue. Israel is already exploding from too many people, and we cannot open the doors now to everyone. There are few millions Palestinians living outside. It's not only those in the refugee camps in Lebanon, you didn't mention Syria, Jordan, but there is also a big diaspora in Europe and the United States. Not all of them would like to come back. All of them would like to feel that they have the right to go back. And the solution will be a compromise, namely in an immigration, first of all, the recognition of the Palestinians' right to return, and the recognition that equality will be also about immigration. There will be no superiority for Jews to come back. Today, a Jew, half Jew, 1/3 Jew, 1/4 Jew, can just land in Europe. I mean, his grandmother was Jewish, the neighbor of his grandmother was Jewish, the neighbor of the cousin was Jewish, and you arrive in Ben Gurion and you get the Israeli passport on the spot. And if you are a Palestinian, I'll give you one small example. I know a painter, a Palestinian painter who lives in Haifa, quite well known. When there was the civil war in Syria, his sister, who was born in Haifa, who was brought up in Haifa, and who fled away in 1948, he wanted to save her life because she was in Yarmouk camp in Syria, and her life was in danger. She was born in Israel, in Palestine. He couldn't bring her. And then I tried to ask Israelis. He was born here. His generations in Israel, in Palestine. He doesn't have the right to save his sister. And any Burmese citizen who claims, or some rabbis claim, that he is somehow related to one of the tribes, has the right just to arrive in Ben Gurion and get a passport. I mean, where else does it happen? So again, this should be corrected, but I must be honest with you, not all the Palestinian refugees will be able to come back, and for sure not to get back all their properties, because then the Jews will have a problem. And we don't want to create, to implement justice by creating new injustice. Look, the place that Catherine and I live is on ruins of a Palestinian village in Tel Aviv. All Tel Aviv is on Palestinian grounds. If I think the total justice means that they should be able to get back, the owners of the lands. I really think so. But then comes the question, where will 7 million Jews go? And we don't want to create new refugees, so we'll have to be less total and more compromised, but it must be based from now on equality. No superiority for the Jews.
More questions?
Yeah, thank you very, very much for your information. I've listened to you for years. Thank you so much, and you opened up my eyes for a lot of things. What always surprises me is the start of Israel as a state. And I think I'm in communication with a lot of Jews because of the situation. And I have been wondering why it would not be a good idea to reopen or to revisit the time when Israel got the permission to establish the state, and to inform people if the League of Nations were how do you say, were the right people to decide it, and how it was decided, and the part of Britain in this case, and just to discuss the whole thing, how it happened. And then people who maybe listen to it and take more sensible sides. And because I've always seen Israelis as Palestinians, calling themselves Israel. I've never seen Israel as a state, because they live in Palestine. So I hope that your suggestion will go through.
First of all, the discussion is already going on among certain historians. And we know, look, I was born in Tel Aviv. I think the first time I heard the word Nakba was when I was 20 or 25. I never heard even the word Nakba. I didn't even know, I wasn't familiar. We saw all those ruins along the roads, the Palestinian ruins, those that they didn't totally erase. We never asked ourselves, who was living here? Where are they now? Why don't they come back? Because we were totally brainwashed. The Zionist operation was very efficient in brainwashing, first of all, the Israelis themselves, and then also the world. And we were not aware to anything. It was one Israeli historian who wrote the book, Benny Morris, who wrote the book, The Birth of the Palestinian Problem, 1948, which I recommend to all of you, which opened my eyes. All of a sudden I realized that I was cheated all those years. But Israelis and others want to be cheated. It's very explosive to start to deal with it, mainly in Israel, because then we will really understand how big is the fire under the carpet, because there is a big fire. Israel was born in a sin. And Israel was born in a very wrong way. But on the other way, take my father. He was born in what you call Sudetenland. He never had anything with Zionism, even not with Judaism. He had his life there. He made a PhD in Prague University. He had a fiancée. His life was promising, and then Hitler came to power. And in 1939, he left his parents and his fiancée, left everything, got on an illegal boat, was 5 months in the sea, 600 refugees on a sea, was detained in Beirut in Lebanon, and finally got illegally into Palestine. He had nothing to do with Zionism, nothing to do with anything but to save his life. And he succeeded to save his life, unlike his parents who were killed in Auschwitz, and he never saw them again. And other members of the family. He didn't have any political ideas in his mind. He just wanted to save his life, and he was lucky enough to do it. I cannot blame him that he came to Palestine. He went wherever he could go. Some of his friends went to Australia, to South Africa, wherever they could go. But today it's already a fait accompli. The Jews are there. I think we should discuss it. But I don't think that if we will discuss the past, the present will look different, except of one thing. And by this, I don't want to be too long, but it's a very important question. The problem is not what happened in 48. The main problem is that what happened in 48 never stopped ever since then. That's the problem. The Nakba was not in 48. The guidelines of Israeli policy until today are according the lines that they were in 48. The Nakba continues until this very day. The pogroms that are happening right now in the West Bank are part of the Nakba. And this should be stopped. And I agree with you that knowing more about the past will maybe open the eyes to many people. With the Israelis it is impossible because they don't want to know about it. Because they understand somewhere in the back of their mind that something went wrong and they don't want to know about it. Because then the whole thing will be, so what are we doing there? So the Orthodox one, they say, okay, but God promised us the land. Very nice, but for secularists this cannot be an argument. I think for any sane people it cannot be an argument. What do you mean God promised you the land? I mean, he registered it in the Interior Ministry, or where exactly did he promise you the land? And who told you that you relate to those who had lived there 2,000 years, and all those terrible questions? It leads us to nowhere. We have to look at the present and at least to stop this policy, this attitude. It's even not policy. It is the same attitude like 48. And in my view also that they the same goals. And the goal finally will be an Arab clean country. And this is criminal.
My name is Foster. Thank you very much for this really illuminating account of the state of things in Israel. I only have one question that I'd be really interested to hear you elaborate on. You talked about the discrimination against the Palestinian citizens in Israel. Could you give us, tell us a little bit more about that, please? Some examples or something. Thank you.
From 1948 until today, there was not one new Palestinian town established. From 1948 until today, there is not one train stop in an Arab city. From 1948 until today, there's hardly one hospital in an Arab city. The Israeli Palestinians, we call them Arabs, Israeli Arabs, are discriminated in anywhere to go. We had 2 years ago the law, the nation law, which limited also the rights in the legal sphere. For example, they lost the special status that their language had. They are 20% of the population, and the language is not anymore recognized as an official language. In Sweden, Yiddish is still recognized as a language. In Finland, 8% Swedes. And you have everything in Swedish by law in Finland. And the Arab language is erased in the law books of Israel. Then there is the unofficial discrimination. And there were researchers on it. If 2 thieves will be brought to justice, the Jewish one will get a different punishment than the Palestinian one. This is not written anywhere, but that's the practice. The budgets, go and see, there is not one major industrial zone in any of the Palestinian cities, only in the Jewish ones. The budgets for education, for health care, the opportunities. And then comes also the daily discrimination. I live in a neighborhood which is close to the university where many Palestinian students are studying. They can hardly find a rental apartment because nobody will rent them when they hear their accent and they realize they are Palestinians. So on one hand, they are in much better position than the Palestinians in the West Bank, obviously. They have Israeli passport, they can travel, they have free life in many ways. On the other hand, they are deeply discriminated. there is a very interesting process which they are participating now. On one hand, they become more and more nationalistic Palestinians. On the other hand, they also, many of them become more and more Israelis, assimilate themselves. I don't know how it will end. There are exceptions, I must say. For example, the health care system of Israel is more and more based on Israeli Palestinians, including doctors, including heads of departments. The chairman of the second biggest bank of Israel is private bank, is an Israeli Palestinian, but those are the exceptions. Generally, they are deeply discriminated, and there is also an ongoing campaign to exclude the Palestinian parties to avoid them from running. Until now, the Supreme Court stopped all those initiatives, but I'm not sure that in the next elections it will not change, and they will find all kinds of excuses why they have not the right to run for the parliament.
Can I ask you maybe just a follow-up on this? Sure. What do you think will happen to this judiciary reform now in Israel? Because it's been a discussion.
I am not part of the protest against it, because in my view it is like on the Titanic. There is a big argument about democracy on the first level, and down in the basement of the ship there is slavery. So, unlike all my leftist friends, I'm not part of this protest against this reform, because finally it's about democracy for the Jews. And there are cracks in democracy for the Jews, and there is a danger for democracy for the Jews, and this so-called reform, which is much more than a reform, it's a destruction, may harm the rights of all of us, including my rights to express myself freely, and I really support any initiative to kill it, to destroy it. And it seems that the right-wingers will not be able to achieve much, because the Israeli public opinion, the liberal public opinion, all of a sudden woke up and is very, very active. Every Saturday, hundreds of thousands are going to the streets, and it's very, very encouraging. But by the end of the day, I cannot forget that we are dealing now only with rights for the Jews. Me personally, I find it hard to be part of it, while you are not allowed in this protest to say a word about the occupation. You are not allowed to speak about it. This has nothing to do with democracy. That's another issue. We'll deal with it some other time. I cannot be part of it.
Now the meeting is soon coming to a close. I would like to ask you one question. If you compare the situation now with what we had, say, 10 years ago, 20 years ago, how would you evaluate that?
I'm very happy you ask it, and I think it's a good way also to conclude our meeting, because this is the most depressing part. Many times people say that I'm too pessimistic, but really, if you judge what was here 10 or 20 years ago, here, I mean, not in Iceland, and what is today, many things, many hopes died. I remember in the 90s, even me, the pessimist, had a great hope from the Oslo Accords, from the Oslo process. I really thought we are on our way to have an end to all this. I remember a very dramatic, ridiculous visit I did in Gaza, waving Gaza. I was at the airest checkpoint and turned back and I waved Gaza, bye-bye Gaza, I'll see you next time as a free land, free country. I was sure that's going to happen. So many hopes were gone. 20 years ago, we still spoke in Israel about peace, which is almost illegitimate to speak about today in Israel. Nobody speaks about peace. It's a forgotten word. People were arguing in Israel about the future of the occupation. The joke was that two Israelis share three views. Every Friday evening there were arguments, what shall we do in the 70s and the 80s? What will we do with the occupied territories? How will we call them at all? Everything was on the table. 20, 30 years ago, nothing remained on the table. Few Israelis believe in any kind of solution. Few in the world believe in any kind of solution. The Palestinians are weaker than ever and more lonely than ever. Remember the years, I'm sure in your country, that being pro-Palestinian and fighting for the Palestinian cause was quite a big part of the left. And really big names and big rallies and big activities for the Palestinians. I don't say it's all gone, because look at you here, but it's not the same value anymore. People deal with it less. It's less in the media. But maybe, and that's maybe an optimistic ending, maybe it is good what happened. Because all this, when we look in a retrospect, was just a masquerade. We were playing with ourselves. We cheated ourselves that we have a solution, that the solution is around the corner, that Israel wants peace, that it's only about a partner, that one more peace conference and we'll solve it. Now it's the era of ending the solutions, the illusions. The illusions are gone. We are quite naked, without much to do or to say, and maybe out of this, because now truth is more prevailing. Now we don't put the mask on ourselves and say, look how beautiful we are, we want peace, we will put an end to the occupation. I mean, we Israelis. Now Israel is saying the truth. We have no intention to put an end to the occupation. We are aiming at a one-state solution, an apartheid state. This is our aiming. Maybe this will be a wake-up call for the world and end this illusion that Israel is a democracy and Israel is aiming to solve the problem. And maybe out of this pessimism and really negative place that we are, we can only come with something new, and maybe out of this something will emerge in the world and then also in Israel. So it's not hopeless, by all means not. It's not hopeless, but we are now in a worse point than 20 years ago, much worse. But out of being in such a low point might be a source of hope. Thank you so much you came, really. You were lovely. Thank you.